Wondering what you should be doing in your garden at this time of year? We start off today's show with fellow reality radio broadcasters Joanne Shaw and Matt Dressing, the landscape designers who host the show Down the Garden Path, and they give us their seasonal tips. Then, we take you into the world of foraging, really fun foods, and food entrepreneurship. So, if you want some very cool food ingredients, or if you want to make food a part of what you do for a living, I think you'll love this. The Food Garden Life podcast today is a rebroadcast of the radio show that aired live on August the 3rd.
Welcome to the Food Garden Life Show with your hosts, Emma and Stephen Biggs, right here on Reality Radio 101. You're listening to the Food Garden Life Show with your hosts, Emma and Stephen Biggs. We talk to creative gardeners and food lovers, people who break the rules and make new ones. Emma is a 17-year-old Gen Z gardener, author and speaker, who is crazy about growing tomatoes. She's also the author of Gardening with Emma. Stephen is a horticultural veteran who teaches and writes about food production. And he's also a rule breaker whose Toronto yard has figs, citrus, olives, and all sorts of things he's not supposed to be able to grow. Now, here are your hosts, the daughter and father duo, Emma Biggs and Stephen Biggs.
Hey everyone! Thanks for hanging out on the show with us today. We're the show that brings together gardening, food, and interesting people.
Hey everybody, welcome and happy August.
We're going to start off the show today with talking to reality radio broadcaster Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, hosts of the show Down the Garden Path. And it's going to be a lot of fun, 4 garden nerds on the line together.
And if you're interested in gardens and food, but don't have a garden at the moment, our second guest will give you lots of ideas for really great food. We'll be talking about foraging, and Jack Hamrick takes us into the world of foraging, food, and something else too, taking something that you love and turning it into your work.
Now get on board now with all your questions, comments, or any shout-outs you want to send in. The studio email address is instudio101@gmail.com. Now, before we get to our guests, how are you doing? Since our last live radio show, we've been on yet another canoe trip. I'm feeling pretty good about portaging the canoe now. And I've also been working a lot at Zawadi Farm at Downsview Park here in Toronto. And so I've been hauling a lot of compost and been doing lots and lots of harvesting.
In some very hot weather, I should add.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just back from another canoe trip with my boys, Quinn and Keaton, and it was a success. We ate speckled trout, so they were pretty stoked about that. And here at home in the Biggs garden, the garlic is harvested, the currants are pruned, and we've enjoyed a few figs this week. But back to today's show, our first guests are fellow broadcasters here on Reality Radio 101. Joanne Shaw and Matt Dressing are landscape designers, and they're the hosts of Down the Garden Path. Joanne heads up Down to Earth landscape design. Matthew heads up Natural Affinity Garden Design, and both of them focus on making great outdoor spaces for busy people.
And Joanne and Matt have a fantastic new book out. It's called Down the Garden Path, a step-by-step guide to your Ontario garden. It's a really great season-by-season, month-by-month guide of what to do in your garden, and you can find it on Amazon.
Well, get on board now. Tell us what you're doing in your garden at this time of year, or send in your questions for Joanne and Matt. Or maybe you just want to say hi. Or maybe you want to hector me to get Emma a greenhouse.
Woo!
The studio email address, instudio101@gmail.com.
Now, without further ado, let's get Joanne and Matt on the line. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Hey, it's great to have both of you here. It's like a reality radio garden nerd symposium.
That's right.
Let's start out by just talking a bit about each of you and the show. And we'll start out, Matt, with you. Maybe just quickly tell us about you and gardening and how you got doing the show with Joanne.
You know what? Actually, I think Joanne kind of leads into that better than.
Okay. Yeah.
Go for it, Joanne.
If that's okay, I'll start first. Because, I started the show while Gary is responsible for convincing me over several years to do the show. So I'm a landscape designer and I love working with clients, and realized that as much as I put a garden in for homeowners, whether it was a big one or a small one, they still needed help with maintaining it and what to do afterwards. And this was back in the day before text messages, but even emails, I couldn't keep track of all the emails of what do I do with this? And do I trim this now? That type of thing. So I started, as a supplement to my business, a garden newsletter. So I thought I would be proactive. And so let my clients know, okay, this month you do this, and this month you don't do that. And it's been very successful over the years. I've been doing it a long time. And that led me to Gary convincing me to do the radio show. And so we've given lots of advice over the years and had lots of great guests on. For about 4 or 5 years, I did it alone. And then Matt had been a guest several times, and we just clicked. And he really brings the science. As a horticulturalist, he brings a science background, and we just did well on the show together. So he joined me as a host, and we kind of grew the show together that way.
Okay, and you do have such a nice energy when you're working together.
Thank you. And so Matt, you jumped on, and you haven't looked back. You've been great.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was about 4 years ago, I think it was. You had me on for a few episodes, our October in the Garden episode, and then you had me back. And so, after the last 4 years, I've been, just Joanne's wingman, her co-host there, and, bringing lots of helpful information and just a nice back and forth. And since joining her, we've taken it from being the radio show every week with Gary. We were able to launch it as a podcast. And, we've just slowly evolved and continued to do the show that we love. And it's kind of given us the fruit of our latest book, our Down the Garden Path, a step-by-step guide to your Ontario garden. So, Joanne, you've been doing it for, I think, 9 years now.
Yeah, I know.
And I've been with you for at least the last 4 seasons. So, it's been a wonderful ride.
Nice. And we're going to get to talking about your book in just a second. But before that, let's tell our listeners how they can listen to your show and the podcast as well.
Well, Joanne and I host Down the Garden Path every Monday night here on Reality Radio 101 at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So it runs for an hour, and we have all sorts of different topics, guests. I think we've had both of you on our show once upon a time. And so we've just got a very much like your show, very conversational, an hour with guests, listener questions, talking everything about making your garden and landscape as low maintenance as possible, as well as bringing on outside interesting gardeners, like maybe your next guest, and just exploring the world of gardening and having fun doing it.
Okay.
Hey, and we just had an email come in from Dawn who's saying, "Hi, Stephen, Emma, Joanne, and Matthew. I am a big fan of all of you. I'm taping the show today. Wow, what a show. All of my favorite gardeners." So Dawn, thank you for writing in. And we'll remind you too that this show actually goes out as a podcast afterwards. So for anyone who is listening now and wants to listen again, you can find this on Stephen Biggs or foodgardenlife.ca or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes, that's right. Well, okay, I have to ask both of you, do you disagree about some things in gardening, or how do your approaches to gardening differ? And Joanne, maybe you could lead in with that.
Sure. I don't know if we necessarily disagree, but I think we have our preferences, right? So I tend to be, I call myself a shrub girl. So I tend to be shrub, tree, multi-stem tree. I see them as being really the foundation of a garden. and lower maintenance than, let's say, annuals and perennials can be. And so I think that's where I really enjoy my shrubs and think there's a shrub for every situation, every garden. And I love my shrubs. Now I know that it does help to have perennials in here and there, that type of thing. But I would have to say that my passion is definitely shrubs. I even have shrubs in containers. I've got, that type of thing. So I try to make the most of shrubs in the garden. And I know, Matt, your preferences lie elsewhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I think there's a shrub for everyone's garden. And like you, I see them as the foundation, those trees, shrubs, evergreens, definitely the bones of your landscape. But I am definitely more of an annual perennial type person. I call those the flesh of the landscape. And I like to see them grow and change and throughout the season, flower and do all different things. I like seeing the ground bare and then coming alive every year and getting in there and planting new annuals and trying new things. So I don't think we really disagree, but we have different viewpoints and different ways we're looking at the garden through different plant scopes.
That's right.
Okay. And, Joanne, I couldn't help but thinking as you were talking about how you like shrubs. I remember talking with somebody who had gone to a school where they had both architecture and landscape architecture programs. And the architecture students, I think disparagingly referred to the landscape architecture students as the shrubbies. So, okay.
That's funny.
Well, we're super excited about your book. And we'd love to know, because it's such a big undertaking to put down all your ideas into a book and to figure out how to organize it and what should go in and what shouldn't. What got you both going down the path to writing a book?
Well, I think the newsletter, Stephen, we did talk to you too. And so your advice was very helpful and for us, but I think the newsletter, I mean, we saw how impactful it was in the sense that people were really enjoying getting that timely bit of information, on what to do. And then we turned it into a segment. So we would have for 2 straight years, at the end of the last Monday of the month, we would say what to do in the garden the following month. And those shows were, of all the shows and all the guests, right, Matt? Like those shows were always so popular because they just, they don't want to read all about, a plant and what you do from A to Z. They just want to know, what do I do today? And what do I do in my garden today? So I think those shows were so popular. So I think the combination of the newsletter and the shows, it really showed us a niche and a need for people because everyone asks for low maintenance. And I know I always joke about, I don't give you plastic plants. There still is maintenance. You still need to do something. But I think if you make it as simple as possible, and if you do it at the right time, pruning can be a really big job if you let it go 3 or 4 years, right? But if you're on top of everything a little bit each month, then I think it really, in the end, makes for a lower maintenance garden.
Yeah, that is really great advice for all parts of the garden. And I think of my garden, and if I'm like weeding after I haven't weeded for a couple of weeks, then it's a big job. But if you weed a little bit over time, it slowly adds up to a weed-free garden.
Mm-hmm.
So we just had another email coming from Brian saying, "Hello gardeners, love all of you. This is such a great treat for listeners. Congrats to Joanne and Matt on their book. This is fantastic." Now let's talk more about the book. And you already mentioned that it's kind of month by month, season by season, because that's how people want to think about gardening. They want to know what's next. So can you share with us some of your top tips for the month of August, which somehow we just started?
The top tips for the month of August. Wow. Well, where do you want to start? Because within each month of August, we go through from seeds to bulbs, annuals, perennials, deciduous trees, evergreens, and then even like Joanne said in the during the shows, we'd always have little miscellaneous tips and tricks that we've scattered throughout there that have to do with tools or local wildlife or stuff. So one of the biggest questions I think that we get, especially this time of year, is often fertilizing. I think that we see the summer has been long, it's been full of drought. This year we haven't had rain for a number of weeks. So one of the parts we have in our August in the garden is a special little page that we drew up on how to fertilize your perennials. And the basics there, it says perennials, but like any part of the book really depends on where you are and the timing and what you're feeding. The overall gist of how to fertilize is there for your trees and your shrubs and other plants. So I think that's a great little section in our August section. One of our other more popular tips that we've got in August, but we have a larger section as well dedicated to the book, is all about lawn care. That's kind of one of the running jokes on our show, is just how to take care of your lawn. So we've got a little bit of everything in August, really.
Maybe you can help us with our lawn. It's not looking too spiffy these days.
And that's okay. I mean, I think that's something that we talk about in the book, that it's not dead, it's dormant, and so people panic thinking they've lost their lawn, and really it's sleeping, it's reserving its energy for because of the heat. And as soon as we get some good rain, near the end of August, beginning of September, poof, it'll be green again. So yeah, we give tips. And lawn can be a bit controversial, so it is a popular topic on our show. People ask us, but there's equal amount of people who are trying to get rid of their lawns. I know my clients are, and turn them into gardens or food gardens. That's definitely been popular. So so we try to balance in the book by making sure we just cover it all for all types of gardeners.
Okay. Well, we just had an email come in from Jason, who says he knows of a disagreement between Joanne and Matt, that Joanne dislikes yellow flowers and plants and Matt likes them. Is that true?
Very true.
Very true.
Very true.
Yeah, I don't. Now let me make it clear. I do not like yellow flowers. I love yellow foliage. So give me lots of yellow foliage, and daffodils. I'm fine with daffodils. But yeah, I'm just not my preference in the garden for some reason. So, and that our listeners are always fun to remind me of that. And Matt loves them.
Yellow's not a subtle color, so maybe that says something about personalities then.
Maybe.
I don't know. I think Joanne's very outgoing, much more than I am. So I'm surprised that it's the reverse. But yeah,
we just had an email come in from Donna. To all of you, she's asking, Stephen, when is your new book coming out? Donna, I don't know. I don't have one in the cooker right now, but I should get thinking about that. And Emma, she's got something here for you too. Donna's wondering, Emma, how big is the new greenhouse? Well, it's an imaginary greenhouse at this point.
In my head, it's massive. It's great. It's filled with tomatoes and peppers and ground cherries. So pretty good on that side.
Excellent.
And Donna's asking, Matt, can I rake my lawn yet? And Joanne, spray paint any yellow flowers to a color that you like. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, and she says, you folks rock. Maybe let's jump back to the question for Matt, though. Can Donna rake her lawn yet?
Yes, you could definitely be raking your lawn. But if it is dormant, you do want to stay off of it. It's defenseless. She's pulled in all of her resources to wait for the cooler weather for her to regenerate. So, Donna, if your lawn is dormant, she's kind of that brown, flat, that scorched kind of lawn look, leave her be. If you have some debris out there, run out and pick it out there. But those growing tips that sit on the soil are exposed, and you don't want to do too much damage to them until they're ready to pop back out in the fall. So minimal out there. If it's green, go right ahead. Yep, for sure. But yeah, just watch what state is she in right now.
Okay. Well, at this time of year, the garden, at least my annual garden, is pretty full, pretty chaotic. There is so much going on. And every year I try to take some notes to remember what's happening. So I know 5 years from now, this variety did well, this plant did well. I'm not very good at that, but I love that in the book you have space for people to write down notes about their garden. So I'd love to hear from both of you. What do you like to keep track of in the garden? What do you like to write down so that you know for the future?
Yeah. But you know what? One of the things that I like to take down and I haven't done it in our book yet, but I have another garden journal, and I like to write down the weather. I like to write down the high for the day. Was it rainy? And then anything else I like to kind of see in the garden. I know when annuals get big and they get close and perennials, you start to get those little spots where the air doesn't quite move, or there's nice little hiding spots for other insect pests and diseases to emerge. So any scouting, any IPM scouting I might be doing, saw aphids or powdery mildew moved into an area that I haven't quite seen it yet before, that sort of thing. So that's what I like to track of, and as well, just like you, any other cool or new cultivars that I might see, or new plants excited that I'll have to try. What about Joanne?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of funny. I'm surprised you didn't say this, Matt. So I tend to take photos. I use photos as my garden journaling. So I was kind of anti notes in the book, and Janet, our lovely editor, and Matt were like, no. I'm like, who's going to write notes in the book? Why wouldn't they just take a picture? So it's kind of funny, Emma, that you bring that up. So I can appreciate that people will write notes in the book. So Matt and Janet won, so that's fine. And I have to say it does look very good. And I've had a lot of people who have commented how much they like that idea. I think for me, it's I'm more visual. So the photos, and when I look from similar things like from month to month, from year to year, like how are things filling in, or what's time to go, that type of thing. I'm pretty vicious. If I don't like the plant and it's not behaving like I want it to go, then it goes. So keeping track of different varieties, new ones when they come out, I could see that being a benefit. But being more visual, I think using a phone is a good thing too.
What you say about photos is very interesting to me, because a year ago, this past spring, I took a bunch of photos in my front garden so I could remember where to plant tulips, because I find that in the fall, when I'm thinking about planting tulips, I can never remember where I already have tulips or other bulbs, and I start planting and I end up digging up half the stuff that's in there. So I love your idea of photos. I think that's a great tool for gardeners.
And we do say that a lot in the book, right? That is often is one of the things. We almost had to take some out because we were saying it too often, but so we think that is a really good and easy way to remember not only where something already is, that's a perfect example, or looking like right now, August can be a tricky time in the garden, and whereas like all the June, July things have finished blooming, and like our fall, September things haven't started blooming yet. So August can be sometimes a little bit of a gap. So taking photos now to see where are the gaps. So when you're planning again for new plants, you can see, okay, well, I need something, at the garden center, you don't need any more June flowering plants. You don't need another peony, but you need something that's blooming in August. And that can really help.
Okay. Another email in, this one from Patty, and saying, this garden shows the best, lots of expert advice. All of you are amazing, and that she's learned so much from all of us over the years. So Patty, thank you. That means a lot to us.
Thank you.
Well,
Thanks,
okay,
Patty.
so we're all going to go out and take photos of our gardens after we finish the show, and we still have a few minutes left. So let's get in a few more tips for this time of year. What can people be doing? And Joanne, maybe we could start with you.
Sure. I'm just going to flip open the book and see. Okay. Well, I think I do want to also mention our design favorites as well in the book. So I think that is another, speaking of holes and places in the garden. So I think now is a good time to look at your garden and kind of see what's blooming, what's done blooming, what you wished would bloom longer, so maybe it's not getting enough sun in its spot. It needs to move. And so Matt and I, each month we went through the book and we kind of picked our favorites. So something that's blooming or looking good that month. And so that's something, I think is really good. And water. I think the other tip right now is watering. And not just annuals and perennials. Our trees need water, our shrubs need water, our city trees need water, which can sometimes be controversial. I think a lot of people think, well, the city tree is not their tree and they don't have to look after it, but it shades our house, it shades our street, it adds property value. There's lots of reasons. And we actually have a diagram in the book about the what's it called, Matt? I'm just
the drip line.
Me. The drip line of where to water the tree, because Matt and I have both seen, and I'm sure you guys have seen it too, people watering the trunk of their city tree, and really the drip line of their tree, where it is in the yard and where they should be watering. So I think that's something, because we keep getting these forecasts where it's going to rain, so then people don't water their garden because it's going to rain, and then it doesn't rain, and then they're, so I think don't forget about your trees. They need water as well. Even though they're more mature, they do need some water.
Okay, that's a great tip. Matt, do you have additional tips to weave in here?
My main tip was going to be watering as well, and those newly planted evergreens, because unlike our trees, shrubs, or perennials are more herbaceous looking things, they're not going to show signs of wilt when they're dry and they're ready for a drink. They're going to get to the point where they're going to collapse almost completely. And evergreens have that way of, taking damage, but as the seasons change, that's where you start to see the damage, the dead tips, or that limb just starts to brown out and die. So, keep those evergreens, especially those newly planted evergreens, an eye on those, and keep them evenly moist all the way until that ground starts to freeze up. So they always have that water to fight. Yeah.
Okay. Well, something I want to say thank you to you both for including in the book is a glossary of garden terms. And it's amazing because it's full of so many great terms. And I just looked it up because you said drip line and I know what that is, but I was like, is it in the book? And I opened up the book and it's there. And there's so many other great definitions in there. Yeah. And so I think that's something that more garden books should include. It's really fantastic.
Excellent. I'm glad you like that, because that's a big shout out to Matt, because he did such a deep dive on that. So thank you, Matt. I think it turned out great. And we literally thought, like, you guys, we didn't think we could come up with like a 50-page book, right? And then poof, we're like, okay, well, maybe we'll get to 100. Well, what are we at? We had to cut off at
139.
139, so yeah, that it was great that Matthew did such a good job and really thorough, because some of that goes to the radio show too, because I think, and you guys probably agree, because we're experienced to a point in what we do. And so we know the terms and we understand them, but it doesn't mean that everybody does. When Matt says herbaceous, or when we talk about hybrids, or, the different tomato varieties, I'm sure are different ways, when you talk about, Emma, I talked to you about, I'm even going to forget the two different types of tomatoes, right?
Determinate and indeterminate.
There you go. Right. And so I can't even keep those straight. So it was really the radio show that showed us, like, wow, these basic terms, evergreen and deciduous, not everybody knows that. So we wanted to just level the playing field and make sure as much of that information and that foundation for people learning was there. So Matt did a wonderful job on the glossary.
Yeah, well, actually, that might be a great way to end this segment, is maybe each of you could tell us what you think the most misunderstood gardening term is, and then listeners can each take home like a little segment of something that they're going to try to remember, a new term to add to their garden glossary.
Ooh,
Emma. So for each of you, maybe Matt, do you want to get us started? What do you think gardeners mix up the most?
Wow. That is a crazy question. That's a very good question. I think you've got me. You know what, I think it jumps out to me is partial sun and partial shade. Partial sun being plants that do like lots of sunlight, as much direct sunlight as they can, but they definitely benefit from a little bit of break in the height of the sun in the afternoon. Hydrangeas kind of jump to my mind with the part sun, just a break from that, 12:30 to 2:30 or 3:30 in the long days of the summer. Some of those varieties just flourish better and look a lot better. Whereas partial shade, they do want a more bright indirect light, but they really only need, that 1 to 2 hours of direct sun to be happy and still look their greatest. And much more than that might stress them out a little more than they like. So I think that's one of those those terms that we just kind of use all the time. Oh, part sun, part shade as the one term, when really there is a slight distinction.
Excellent.
That would be
Excellent.
mine.
That's a great one.
I'm going to say mulch. Sounds like
Okay.
a hard thing to say, but I feel like people are starting to, especially, don't even get me started on the whole colored mulch, because that's a whole other show. But, I think people see mulch as a feature, as a decorative feature, as something like that, the mulch needs to look good. That's why they want black, or they want it to look a certain way, as it's a feature of the garden. And mulch has a job. It is meant to protect the soil. It's meant to help reduce watering by shading and keeping the moisture in. And it also is meant to break down and improve the soil. So you see a lot of people choose a mulch because I like this mulch because it lasts a long time. And it's like, well, that's not good, because you want the mulch to break down and to improve the soil. So I feel like people view mulch as a like I said, a decorative layer to their garden, when really it is meant to be a living organism, and it really has a purpose and a function in the garden. So I think that's
Beautiful.
one thing I'm a little I think is misunderstood in the
Very
industry.
passionate about.
I'm passionate
Okay.
about.
Excellent. Well, Joanne and Matthew, thank you for hanging out with us. This has been so much fun. Before we let you go, where can people get a copy of your book?
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon.ca or .com, whichever one you are on.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
That's right. And we'd love for everybody to listen to us Monday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Reality Radio 101. And you can check out our podcast, our past shows, if you're new to us. Also on all the podcast places, all the streaming services, you can have a listen to past shows of Matt and I. And we want to thank you so much for letting us join you here.
Thank you
it's
so
been
much.
Fun. We have to do this again. So Joanne and Matt, thank you. Bye
You're
now.
Welcome. Bye.
Bye. That was Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing. You can tune into their show, Down the Garden Path, on Mondays right here on Reality Radio 101 at 7 p.m. Eastern. And you can also find their new book, Down the Garden Path, on Amazon.
And coming up in just a moment, do you love amazing food? Do you love the unusual? How about black walnut milk or tulip poplar flowers? Jack Hamrick from Foraged talks about great food, foraging, and making a business out of a passion.
You're listening to the Food Garden Life Show. I'm Emma Biggs.
We'd love it if you keep in touch between radio shows. What do you like about the show? What would you find useful? Message us at foodgardenlife.com or find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, where we hang out under the handle Food Garden Life. And Emma also hangs out on Instagram as EmmaBiggs_grows. And her website is emmabiggs.ca.
And we also have a bunch of shout outs today from people who have got in touch between shows. We are so lucky to have such amazing listeners. So thank you. Kyle, Gail, and Olivia, thanks for writing in. We're so glad that you're enjoying the show. Kelly, thanks for the smile. And Florence, I love the picture of the greenhouse that you sent. Pressure's on, Dad.
Thanks, Florence. And on Instagram, thanks to Urban Girl Gardener. I'm eating homegrown figs this week here in Toronto. And if you want to up your game at growing figs this year, check out my online fig masterclass for cold climates. There's no one right way to grow figs in cold climates, but there is a best way for you and for your garden. And you can find that as you see different approaches to growing, ripening, and overwintering figs. This self-paced masterclass will help you do that. Find it at foodgardenlife.com. Just go to the courses page.
If you want lots of great ideas about gardening, about food, about the cool people who find amazing food, cook it, about people who have amazing gardens and are just doing really cool things, remember that we have a weekly podcast. A couple of the fun episodes that we've had since our last live radio show are Rooftop Figs in Pittsburgh and Growing from Your Own Kitchen Scraps.
You're listening to the Food Garden Life Show with your hosts, Stephen and Emma Biggs, right here on Reality Radio 101. To get on board right now, send us an email. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, back to your hosts of the Food Garden Life Show, Stephen and Emma Biggs.
Hello, and we're back. And now we're going to get into some really unusual food, into foraging, and making a business out of a passion. Have you ever heard of black walnut milk or eating tulip poplar flowers? I hadn't. Jack Hamrick loves to cook, and he loves great produce. Loves great foraged foods, but living in New York City, he found it tough to connect with specialty food producers and foragers.
I love the idea of turning a passion into your work. Jack got the idea for what he does when he found it tough for food lovers to find specialty produce and foraged ingredients. Jack and his partner run Foraged, an online marketplace for specialty foods from farmers, foragers, and specialty processors. The website is foraged.market. So send in your questions for Jack. Do you have a favorite foraged food? The studio email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, without further ado, let's get Jack on the line. Jack, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, it's great to have you here. And maybe we could start out today, Jack, just by finding out a little bit more about why you wanted to start your own business in this area of the foraged and specialty foods. Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, certainly. So my whole background, both in academia and in my professional career, has always revolved around sustainability and particularly sustainability innovation. And the thing I love about sustainability is that it is always part of a system. You can't ever do something more sustainably by just doing one thing. You really need to look at the entire system. And so I've done everything from solar energy to hydrogen trucks to waste and recycling sustainability. But underneath all of that, I've always really had a strong passion for good food and really the love of the people doing the labor. I think it's something that's been missed over time in our modern world. And with that undercurrent in my passion and experience in sustainability, I've been really itching to kind of merge the two of them. I've always found that my motivation really comes from doing something that I feel passionate about, that I'm really working towards something I believe in. And after a few years of working at a big company doing sustainability innovation, most recently at a startup doing waste and recycling innovation, I finally felt prepared to strike out on my own and start to chase something that I've been passionate about forever. And I'm sure we'll get a bit more into the details, but briefly, I started to see an opportunity around overlooked foods, both indigenous foods, wild foods, just unconventional foods in general, and the opportunity to really empower small-scale food producers and put the power of the food system back in the hands of the little guy. And when I kind of saw that opportunity and the sustainability angle that you could implement around it, I decided to take the leap.
Okay.
That's a pretty amazing jump from being in waste and recycling and vehicles and jumping into food. And yet, as you say, I guess sustainability is that common thread in there.
That's right. Yeah. And it's like, I'll pull an example out of the air for, I call it systems thinking. I think it can be applied to really anything, but sustainability is really interesting because let's say you're, thinking about building a new highway or something, right? someone might, an urban planner might just say, hey, this is the best location. And then you might have another expert saying, well, there's already a community there. What happens to that community? Someone else might say, what about the tax revenue? What about the wetlands that's nearby? There's so many different angles. And I feel like people often become very specialized. And when you're thinking about sustainability and these sorts of decisions and innovations, you really do have to think about every single angle of how something might be changed for the better. I've always been very generalist in my interests and sort of disciplines that I've pursued. And with sustainability and with food, it really is this holistic approach. You know, you can't just think about the soil, you can't just think about the irrigation or the nutrients. It's all part together. And the only way to improve it holistically is by taking that approach as one.
Okay.
So let's talk more about this journey. And so what was it like when you actually decided to start the business? And let's also talk about your business partner, Andy, who you started the business with.
Sure, of course. So this was back in December 2020. And I was pretty actively looking for some way to get involved with sustainable aquaculture. I was particularly interested in sustainable seaweed cultivation. I was also interested in everything from catfish to oysters, pretty much anything that grows in the water that hasn't been tapped. And I was talking to, at the time, somewhat of a distant friend, Andy, who's now my co-founder. At the time, he was a professional nature photographer on the coast of North Carolina. And I contacted him and said, hey, do you know anyone doing seaweed, catfish, et cetera? I'm interested in getting involved. And he said, no, I don't, but tell me more about what you're interested in. Somehow I randomly mentioned that I was looking for a type of mushroom called chicken of the woods, which I didn't really know anything about other than it tasted like chicken and it was really good. And I said, I can't find it anywhere. I've had it at this restaurant once, but yeah, you know, any ideas? He goes on to tell me that he's a certified forager, which I did not know what that was, and that chicken of the woods only grows in the wild, and you literally cannot cultivate it. So I'm thinking, wow, it's a whole new world to me. Tell me more. He goes on to say, yeah, I actually have a ton of chicken of the woods right now. He was living at that point in Asheville, North Carolina, and he says, I don't know how to sell it. I have a ton of it, sustainably harvested. I'm legally allowed to sell it, but I don't know what to do. So it's a clear light bulb. I'm like, I can't get that. I'm looking everywhere to find that one type of mushroom. You have a ton of it and you don't know how to sell it. Like, we should start thinking about that idea. So at first it was kind of a silly sort of realization, like how many people are looking for chicken of the woods? How many people have it? You know, kind of a one-off random thing. But I started looking more into the industry around wild mushrooms and wild foods, and how opaque it is, how sort of underground it is, and how expansive it is. At the same time, I realized that a community around wild mushrooms in particular was massive, and very, very engaged and very enthusiastic. So when I see hundreds of thousands of people on these Facebook groups, on Reddit, and so forth, and then this very, very large sort of underground market, I kind of came to the realization that if you take this huge fragmented market of these foods that you, for the most part, literally cannot grow, and you merge it with this community that's already extremely passionate, and you put that on a platform marketplace website, there you go. You've solved the supply issue, you solved the demand issue, you bring in the community into the mix. And we saw a ton of enthusiastic response. I mean, the first week that we went live, we basically did no marketing at all for the first probably half a year or so. And the response from the community was so strong that we ended up growing pretty quickly.
That's amazing. Okay, well, tell us a little bit about what it's like to work together. What do each of you do? Because I think a lot of our listeners are interested in this idea of taking something they love and making it into a business. But the idea of collaborating with other people can be intimidating. So what do you each do and how do you do that?
Yeah, good question. So we actually work incredibly well together with sort of different backgrounds and different strong suits. So Andy was a professional photographer for quite some time, very sort of artistry driven, very, very engaged with other people, very empathetic. And he was our first user, setting up his own business on Foraged. So he has an incredible background in design and really just being super close in touch with the people using our website to grow their businesses. And then from my side, I'm more of the business background, the big picture, the innovation side of it. And so when you combine that deep empathy from the user perspective and sort of the artistry and technology perspective that Andy brings with my side of the higher level view, the overall business trajectory, bringing those two together, we plug like almost all the gaps that we've had here at the beginning, and it's been a very happy marriage so far.
Okay. All right. And for any listeners who are just tuning in, we're chatting with Jack Hamrick from foraged.market, which is an online marketplace for foraged and specialty foods. Jack, next, I'm wondering if you can just give us any pieces of advice for people who are interested in the entrepreneurial side of things and starting a business. What are your top 2 or 3 tips you'd give to people?
Sure. My top tip is give it a shot. You'll never know if you don't try. And I definitely think the fear of regret, I think anyone might regret not giving something a shot more than they would if they did give it a shot. So even if it's just on the side, just getting your feet wet, that would definitely be my first advice. The other thing I've noticed too is I feel like almost every day of aging, I'm not that old, but I got married a few months ago. I have a dog now, and it seems like with every day that passes, sort of the risk tolerance decreases. Granted, I don't have kids. That's a whole new world of dependency and people to provide for. But I really do feel like the best day is today, and give it a shot. You can do a lot on the side, whether it's weekends and your off time. That's really how we got started with Forage. Was we both had regular jobs, and we were just seeing what was out there. I think beyond just having like the self-confidence and curiosity to give it a shot is think about what is driving that interest and what is driving that curiosity. Is it for a lot of people in our community, it's really the drive to nourish people in their communities, to connect with new people all over the world who are passionate about the things that they're passionate about. I think as long as there's a passion underneath and something that's really core to who you are, that's really the key to not just finding massive success. That's a great byproduct of it. But simply that self-confidence and belief in yourself, and knowing that at the end of the day, if you give it a shot and you have fun with it, that I think that's success for me at least, or for anyone I would give advice to.
Yeah, that is really good advice. Well, I'm curious to know, when was the moment when you felt like Forage was starting to connect with people, when you thought, okay, this is a successful business and it's doing what we wanted it to?
Yes, great question. So I love seeing the reviews on the website that they often come in the form of something like, I grew up eating morels with my grandmother in Michigan, and I moved away from Michigan 40 years ago. I've never had morels in the last 40 years. Thank you so much for existing. Thank you for connecting me with other small scale food producers and helping me relive this joy. Those types of reviews always make me very, very happy. And so similar sorts of angles around that, of really the core of it is, I can't get this food. I really love it. And I love supporting small businesses. Bingo. That's exactly why we're here. And then on the seller side, so we basically had 2 sets of customers, or 2 sets of users. And then on the seller side, we knew that it was starting to work and start to connect with people when we saw some people quitting their day jobs. So people were doing this as a side hustle. Maybe they were foraging. Maybe they had a little tiny brand of vinegars or coffees or whatever. And people have been able to quit their day jobs and go full time because of the platform that we offer. And seeing that growth and them living out their dreams, doing what they love, has been incredibly rewarding. And of course, a great sign that we're doing something that people want.
Okay, I'm looking at Emma now, just in case she's thinking about doing that with tomatoes.
Yeah, just quit school and grow tomatoes full time. Woo.
Yeah, do it.
Well, I'm really excited that you brought up morels, because morels are the only mushroom that we forage. And I think Mom and Dad did more foraging before me and my brothers came along. But I've always thought and always wanted to do more mushroom foraging. And so I was excited when I went on the website and I saw that you also have experiences. Can you tell us what those are?
Yes, that's a great segue. Yes, so we just introduced experiences maybe only a month or two ago, and the idea for experiences is that as wonderful as it is to enable access to these amazing, unique foods for people who can't get them, it's even more amazing to bring new people into the world, into the physical world, most often, where all sorts of different experts or small business owners, whatever they might be, can now connect with people and teach them about foraging, teach them about gardening, about farming. They can do events, demonstrations, workshops. Essentially, if it's related to food or culture or agriculture or art, and someone's doing it and they're passionate about it, other people want to know. And now they can go on Foraged and from the same shop as someone might have, they can both sell their tomatoes and also offer morel foraging classes. I think it's been really, really cool, and we've had a lot of great feedback from the individuals using our site for their businesses to now be able to connect even further in real life.
Oh, that's neat. And so with the classes, are those classes that are in person and physical, or can those also be virtual?
Good question. They can be virtual. Yes, we've had, especially during some of the more recent waves of the COVID-19 outbreaks, we have had people doing Zoom classes. So there's some people doing like workshops and stuff that are either live on Zoom or downloadable content. It's really been very interesting to see how creative some of the people have been with the way that they introduce their knowledge and experience.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that Andy, one of the co-founders, is certified as a forager, and you mentioned that some people are foraging as or making things as a side job, and they've quit their main job to do that full time. Who are some of these people who are selling on forage.market? Are they certified professionals? Are they just backyard gardeners or backyard foragers who are looking for things? Who can use this platform?
It's an amazing array. So the people in our community are just incredibly interesting. Everything from there's a cryptocurrency network software developer down in the south of the United States who's a forager and sells his products on our site, to a mom and pop in the middle of Pennsylvania. They're about 75 years old, and they sell their goods on Forage as well. So the array is amazing, and it makes my job very, very interesting to connect with these people. The certification aspect is interesting too, because there are very sparse laws in the United States around what can and can't be harvested, who can and cannot harvest. There's really only a few states that have things on the books around it, North Carolina being one of them, which Andy is certified through the organization that their program is recognized by the state. But for the vast majority of states, there's really no regulation, which we're actively working towards creating our own certification programs to make sure people have the knowledge who want to get involved in the space. And down the road, we're hoping to get more involved on some of the policy aspects as well, to make sure that people can participate in this in a healthy and sustainable and safe way.
Okay. A couple emails in from Tim and Alexis who are enjoying the show. So thank you. This is sure a fascinating talk. I wanted to ask you, Jack, just more specifically about a couple of the food products. I know we don't have time to get into all of them, but I put out the teaser earlier about the black walnut milk and the tulip poplar flowers as examples of unusual things that are foods that are for sale. Are there a couple others that jump out at you as being unexpected, things that surprise people?
Oh, goodness. I'm not kidding when I say every single day there is a new food that I have never heard of in my life. It's honestly a delight to see all these new things come in. I've always been a real sucker for maple syrup, which is not that unusual, but there's some amazing maple syrups available on the site. Another thing I've really enjoyed, this seller is from Canada. They're from Muskoka. They have a wild ramp infused vinegar that is absolutely spectacular. Very good on French fries. Lots of interesting nuts. We're getting very into pawpaws right now. We'll be working with a ton of different pawpaw farmers throughout the Midwest to help commercialize some of their ingredients, which is a very up and coming market. We're very happy to be involved there. Other interesting things, aronia berries. There's like 100 million berries that sometimes appear made up, but they are certainly real. Wine berries, sumac, like it's amazing. It's amazing just how much bounty there is around us and how much traditional knowledge has been glossed over for just your run of the mill celery or whatever it is. It's been spectacular to shed awareness not only on the individual edible ingredient, but to tell the stories of the people who have retained that knowledge and that culture around it is something that I'm very motivated by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, certainly for me, an aronia berry, it's a name I hear all the time, but I wouldn't know where to start with it in the kitchen. So it's great to think that people are passing on that knowledge.
Well,
yes, and go ahead, Emma.
Sorry, you can go ahead.
I was going to say, Steve, that's a big, we're hiring right now for those listening. We need help. A big gap we have right now is we want to be able to educate folks better on what to do with all these amazing ingredients. Some of them are very unfamiliar to the everyday person. And we think we have a gap right now, not doing it justice when we're not teaching and educating folks on how to do different things in the kitchen with these ingredients.
Mm.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, actually, I saw some really cool recipes on the website, everything from how to grill chicken of the woods and purslane salad to something I was very excited about, ginger chocolate daylily buds. And so I was really excited to see lots of the recipes on there.
Yes, thank you. That's our teammate, JB. He is an unbelievable cook and an even better photographer. I don't understand how he comes up with these recipes and how he shoots them with such beautiful photography. He recently made a chicken of the woods buffalo sandwich that I want to eat my computer when I look at it on the screen.
Oh.
It's absolutely, it's amazing.
Oh, that sounds good. And we saw Chicken of the Woods, by the way, for sale not too far from here in Toronto. You said Kitchener, I think, Emma?
Yeah.
So for people wondering where different providers are, they're everywhere, right? Everywhere across North America.
That's right. Yeah, we're in primarily US and Canada. We are in, I think, about seven to nine other countries around the world, but primarily US and Canada. And we do make a point on any given product page or shop page to have a map to show you whereabouts someone is. We don't show the actual address. Privacy is key. But yeah, we always want to show where things are from. Some people treat different ingredients almost like wine, where they know that XYZ tastes different in the Pacific Northwest than it does in the Northeast. And by providing more information about who's actually producing your food is really what we stand for.
Yeah, well, I was very excited to see Chicken of the Woods because I've heard so much about it, but it's one of those things I've never tried. And so I'm excited to hopefully make Dad order some when we're done this and hopefully try a whole bunch of other neat things that I have also never tried.
And so
Absolutely.
for people interested in checking out some of the foods, foraged.market. And Jack, for people who are thinking, oh boy, I've got, out back, we're growing XYZ, or we've got whatever, people interested in maybe selling or thinking about selling, what should they do? Where should they find out more?
Definitely, yes. So our website is interesting. It's not .com. There's all these fancy new website domains now. And by fancy, I mean less expensive. So our website is www.foraged.market. That's our main website page. And for folks who are interested in growing their business and sharing their wonderful products and ingredients with others, you can go to www.forage.market/sell. And there's more information on there. It's free to join, free to list. We're here for the folks on the site. And we'd love to see more people get involved.
Okay, that's wonderful. And maybe as a parting question for you, if you had to pick one foraged food to cook for dinner for tonight, is there anything that jumps out at you?
It is chanterelle season right now in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, so I'd probably pick some chanterelles, maybe a little pasta with it, maybe even a little truffle oil on top. That sounds pretty tasty.
Ooh,
Oh, that sounds so good.
sounds great.
Jack, it was really great talking to you. Really great to hear about Forage. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much, Emma and Steve. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Bye now, Jack.
Take care.
That was Jack Hamrick from Foraged, and you can find him and lots of very cool food online if you go to www.foraged.market. And the Food Garden Life Show is just about over for today. So a big thanks to Joanne Shaw, Matt Dressing, Jack Hamrick for joining us on the show, and a shout out to our producer, Gary, who makes this first Wednesday of every month just so much fun for us. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Steve and Emma.
And thanks to all the listeners who wrote in. Thank you, Dawn, Brian, Jason, Donna, Patty, Brenda, Alexis, and Tim.
And we'd love to hear you for our next live show. You can always connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, where we hang out as Food Garden Life. And you can also find me on Instagram under Emma Biggs _grows. And don't just connect with us, give us your feedback. Are we getting things right? Who do you want us to have on the show next? Just drop by foodgardenlife.com.
You're listening to the Food Garden Life Show. I'm Stephen Biggs.
And I'm Emma Biggs. Have a great month, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Food Garden Life Show with your hosts, Stephen and Emma Biggs, right here on Reality Radio 101.